Pelican worked the breakwater line the way a fisherman worked a seam, by showing up at the right hour, reading the surface, and committing to one narrow strip of water where everything changed. The breakwater at San Brio Harbor wasn't pretty. It was functional, a long arm of stacked concrete blocks, darkened by salt and algae, with steel rings embedded for mooring and a service road that ended in a locked chain gate. On the inside, the harbor water stayed calmer, greener, full of boats and diesel smell. On the outside, the open bay slapped and breathed, and the water ran clearer when the tide pulled. The breakwater line, the exact edge where calm met chop, was where bait gathered. Not always, but often enough that the people who watch the sea for a living learned to check it first. And lately the sardines had been splitting wide along that line, like someone had opened a zipper down the school. Mateo Rivas noticed it because his job depended on patterns. He wasn't a commercial captain. He ran one of the small guiding skiffs for tourists and locals who wanted an easy morning on the water. Mackerel, bonito if you were lucky, maybe a halibut on a good day. He also did harbor maintenance work when bookings were slow, clearing floats, hauling trash, running messages for the marina office. Mateo's strength was that he was always out there, always looking. The first time he saw it, he thought it was a trick of light. He was idling just outside the breakwater at dawn, waiting for his clients, two brothers from inland who had booked a simple sardine run experience because they'd seen a video online. Mateo hated that phrase. Sardine runs weren't experiences. They were weather and timing and luck. But the morning was calm, and the tide was turning. Mateo leaned on the console, sipping coffee, scanning the water. The Pelican was already there. Not one, several. They lined the breakwater blocks like stern judges, bodies facing the bay, heads turning in small, synchronized movements. Their wings were folded tight, but their posture said ready. Pelicans didn't sit like that unless something was coming. Mateo eased the skiff closer, careful of rocks. He watched the surface along the breakwater line. At first it looked empty. Then he saw it, thin silver flickers just under the surface, moving as one body. A sardine school hugging the calm side, right at the seam. Mateo's pulse picked up. "Okay," he murmured, as if speaking to the water helped. Then the school did something strange. Instead of tightening when the pelicans shifted, the sardines split. The mass opened into two wide arcs, leaving a dark lane between them. The lane ran parallel to the breakwater, like a channel carved by fear. The sardines didn't scatter randomly. They separated cleanly, two coordinated halves moving at equal speed. Mateo frowned. Fish did split sometimes, but usually under pressure. Predators below, birds above. This looked organized, like they were avoiding something specific in the center. A pelican launched. It didn't flap much, just dropped off the block and glided low over the water, then folded and plunged, beak first, into the seam. A second pelican followed a heartbeat later. Their dives were sharp, efficient. But here's the odd part. They weren't diving into the densest part of the school. They were diving into the lane. Mateo squinted, trying to understand. The lane wasn't empty. It was full of something the surface didn't reveal until the pelicans hit it. The sardines that had been forced upward by something below, compressed into that narrow corridor like sand between fingers. The pelicans had figured it out. They weren't chasing fish across open water. They were working the breakwater line like a fence, using it to funnel sardines into a predictable lane. Each dive pushed the school tighter, and each push made the split wider, not narrower. The sardines split wide because the pressure came from two sides, the breakwater and the birds. And then Mateo saw the third pressure. A swirl beneath the lane, darker and fast. Something larger moved under the sardines, cutting through them without breaking the surface. The school tightened, then split again in a wider arc. Mateo's skin prickled. Bonito, maybe small tuna, or even a pair of sea lions. Predators below were driving the sardines up, pelicans above were punching down, and the breakwater blocked escape on one side. It was a trap made by geography and opportunists. Mateo's clients arrived then, a white sedan pulling into the harbor lot, two men carrying cheap rods in shiny new cases. They waved like this was a theme park. Mateo forced a smile and idled back inside the harbor to pick them up, but his mind stayed outside on that seam. When he returned with the brothers aboard, the scene had intensified. Pelicans now flew in a steady rotation, lift from the blocks, glide, plunge, swallow, rise, and settle again. Gulls screamed overhead, trying to steal scraps. The water along the seam flashed silver with panicked fish. The sardines kept splitting, the lane widening, the two halves of the school arcing farther apart as if trying to outrun the center corridor. Mateo killed the engine and let the skiff drift, careful to stay out of the bird's dive line. He handed the brothers their bait rigs, but they were barely paying attention to him. They were staring at the surface, mouths open. "What is that?" one asked, voice loud with excitement. "Sardines," Mateo said, short. "They're opening up," the other said, pointing. "Like a river." Mateo nodded. "They're making room for something," he said. The brother blinked. "For what?" he asked. Mateo didn't answer immediately. He watched a pelican plunge and come up with a fish sideways in its pouch. He watched the fish lane pulse like a living thing. He watched a dark shape roll just under the surface, the sardines jumping aside as if pushed by a moving wall. Then a sea lion's head popped up for a second in the lane, whiskers dripping, eyes bright. The brothers shouted. Mateo's jaw tightened. Sea lions were clever. They learned spots like this and returned, sometimes with friends, turning a sardine school into a circus that tangled lines and drew crowds. And crowds brought problems. Boats too close, people throwing bait, harbor authority complaints, idiots trying to touch wildlife. Mateo kept his voice controlled. "Fish if you want," he told the brothers. "But keep your hooks shallow, and don't cast near the birds." They nodded like they understood. They didn't. Within minutes, one brother cast too close to the breakwater, and his hook snagged a floating scrap of kelp. He yanked, line humming, and the kelp came loose, right into the lane where the sardines were splitting. A pelican dove at the same moment. It missed the fish and hit the kelp ribbon instead, beak catching fiber. The bird jerked, wings flaring. It pulled up with kelp trailing like a green scarf. Mateo's chest tightened. Kelp wasn't line, but it could still tangle, and if there was actual fishing line in the water, and there always was near a harbor, then birds could get in trouble fast. "Reel in," Mateo snapped at the brother. "Now." The brother froze. "Why?" he stammered. "Because you're feeding a pelican kelp," Mateo said, voice sharp. The brother reeled clumsily. The kelp slid free, and the pelican shook it loose mid-air and kept flying, annoyed but not harmed. Mateo exhaled slowly. The brothers stared at him, chastened for a moment. But the sea didn't care about their feelings. The sardines kept splitting. The pelicans kept working. The sea lions kept rolling through the lane, pushing fish into the surface like bubbles. Mateo watched the breakwater blocks and noticed something else. The pelicans weren't randomly spaced. They were positioned at intervals, like fishermen along a dock, each bird guarding a section of the line. When one dove, the nearest two shifted slightly, filling the gap. It looked like cooperation, but Mateo knew better. It was competition that happened to a line. Still, the effect was the same. A living net. The sardines split wide to escape the center pressure, but the split itself created the corridor the Pelicans exploited. Every attempt to flee made the trap more efficient. By late morning, half a dozen boats had gathered outside the breakwater, drawn by the spectacle. Some stayed at respectful distance, some didn't. A small charter boat motored too close, and the gulls went wild. Mateo's radio crackled. Harbor master calling out a general warning about wildlife and safe distance. Mateo replied with a calm, "Copy," but inside he was worried. This wasn't just a show. It was a pattern now. The Sardines had been splitting like this for days, and the Pelicans had learned the line. If the Sardines ran this breakwater for weeks, the birds and sea lions would settle into a routine. Tour boats would arrive daily. Fishing pressure would increase. Lines and hooks would accumulate. Sooner or later, something would tangle. Mateo looked at the brothers, who had already caught 3 small mackerel each, laughing like children. He didn't want to ruin their morning, but he also didn't want to be the guy who watched a pelican drown because he didn't feel like talking. He decided to do the boring, responsible thing. He turned the skiff back toward the harbor and tied up at the nearest float. The brothers protested, confused. "Why are we leaving?" one asked, annoyed. Mateo pointed toward the breakwater where pelicans still dove. "Because this is getting crowded," he said. "And when it gets crowded, animals get hurt." The brother frowned. "It's just birds," he said. Mateo's eyes hardened. "It's not just anything," he replied. "They're doing what they do. We're the ones who add hooks." He didn't wait for argument. He helped them off the boat, returned their deposit with less politeness than he normally used, and walked straight to the harbor office. Inside, the air smelled like old paper, sunscreen, and coffee that had been reheated too many times. The harbor master, Elena Park, looked up from her desk as Mateo entered. She was in her 40s, hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp. "You seeing the sardines?" she asked immediately. Everyone had been talking about it. "Yes," Mateo said. "And the pelicans are working the breakwater like a line. It's pulling boats in. It's going to get messy." Elena nodded slowly. "We've had 3 calls already," she said. "People think it's a show." Mateo leaned on the counter. "It's a funnel," he said. "Sea lions below, birds above. The fish split wide, making a lane. Everyone's casting into it. Someone's going to snag a bird." Elena's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" she asked. Mateo didn't ask for miracles. He asked for the one thing that mattered. Order. "Put a temporary no-fishing buffer along the outside breakwater for the morning hours," he said. "At least while the birds are diving. Signs, patrol, whatever you can do. Keep boats back. Give the pelicans space." Elena exhaled, already thinking about enforcement and complaints. "People will hate it," she said. Mateo shrugged. "People hate a lot of things," he replied. "They'll hate it more if a pelican ends up wrapped in line and the video goes viral with your harbor name on it." Elena stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Okay," she said. "We'll try." Mateo left the office and walked back toward the water. Outside, the breakwater line still flashed silver and white. Birds and fish and sea lions locked into the same moving geometry. The sardines kept splitting wide. The pelicans kept working the line. And now the humans, finally, were going to have to work too, not with hooks and cameras, but with boundaries, before the spectacle turned into damage that couldn't be undone.